the potential threats that are kind of now always out there, that could impact our election administration. So let me back up a little bit first. Through mail-in voting and public health concerns, those have come to dominate the conversations about voting in elections in recent months. But cybersecurity is still a critical aspect of our elections infrastructure and something that we can't take for granted. My colleague Steve Simon had a great quote a couple of years back. He's the Secretary of State of Minnesota, and I and my other colleagues quote him warmly and accurately, which is that, election cybersecurity and election security in general are a marathon without a finish line. This is a new 21st century problem that we are just going to continue to grapple with as we go forward in our democracy. And it's not something we can ever take for granted. It's not something that we can ever let fall off of our radar, even in light of a global pandemic. And I would say, especially in light of a global pandemic, because the pandemic itself has brought new vectors, as the alphabet soup government agencies like to say, new vectors of potential threat, right, or attack to our systems. So the first thing that I want to say is that here in New Mexico, we were ahead of the curve on election security even before I came into the Secretary of State's office, looking at ways to protect our outward-facing systems. So any system that interfaces with the internet, and probably the one that you all are most familiar with is nmvote.org, which is our voter information portal. So making sure the information when you go to look up your voter registration or do an online voter registration or an online application for an absentee ballot, a sample ballot, that system is one of the most safeguarded and protected systems possible, but it's also important for you all to know that that data is outward facing and it is separate from the main source of that data, right? And so we've taken precautions. We use a variety of tools at our disposal, both privately that we have procured ourselves, as well as through our partnership with DHS and CISA, which is the particular department within DHS that has to do with cybersecurity. We check for vulnerabilities, we test, we train employees on a regular basis using all of those tools to make sure that we are safeguarded and protected. The other system, of course, is our election night results reporting system. So we take a wide variety of precautions to make sure that that data is also safe, secure, and accurate, and that the systems that are being used to upload the data are totally separate and air-gapped from any other network or system at the county level, to make sure that we don't run an additional risk of having that data or information tampered with. Now, I'm talking about a lot of things in generalities and not a whole lot of specifics, because it's important that we don't give away the keys to the kingdom, so to speak. We never want to give a potential threat enough information to do damage to our systems. But please know that we do all of these things regularly. And as I mentioned, we are in this very close partnership with our federal partners, especially DHS. So let me talk about how that's working at a more national level. Once elections were designated as critical infrastructure in January of 2017 by then Secretary Jay Johnson of the Department of Homeland Security, they moved quickly to form the Government Coordinating Council. Again, I've mentioned that before, and what that group is made up of is election officials from across the country. There are 8 secretaries of state, again, myself included from day one. There are also state election directors and local election officials like county clerks from around the country. And what we do is we've been working for the last 3.5 years to advise DHS and our federal partners, and those include the FBI, the Office of National Intelligence. Sorry about that. My computer said that it wants to restart now, and that is not really the best time. So, okay, hopefully that worked. And so we are working together with DHS and those federal partners, mainly to strengthen, at least initially, the communication. So for example, what happened in 2016 was that federal partners, the NSA and other intelligence agencies saw that there were these scans going on of systems, that there were these potential hacks that were being carried out, that even a couple of voter registration systems in states had been accessed by external threats, and they were sharing that information late, and because it couldn't be declassified quick enough, and to the extent that they were sharing it with the wrong folks. So in many states, they were sharing it, let's say, with a governor, and maybe the governor and the Secretary of State didn't have a good working relationship. And so in most cases, the states and state election officials in particular were really left out of the loop and did not know what was going on. So now we have this very streamlined and very, very in my opinion, impressive set of communication protocols. And every chief election official and key staff throughout the state have security clearances. We are given regular detailed security briefings on what the threats are, what's going on out there in other states and jurisdictions. When a successful, let's say, phishing attack or ransomware attack happens, we are notified immediately, and though we may not know exactly where that incident occurred, we know how it occurred, we know the IP addresses to look out for and protect against, we know what the particular language of the phishing email was, et cetera, so that we can guard against it spreading to other states. So that in particular has been hugely beneficial just to our ability to get ahead of and prevent attacks from happening around the country in a systematic way. As well, I already mentioned this, but Department of Homeland Security and CISA in particular provide a variety of free tools to state and local election jurisdictions, such as risk and vulnerability testing, and a variety of other free tools to election officials to keep their systems secure. This is a particular challenge, as you might imagine, at the local level, particularly in small counties that don't have a lot of resources. So being able to have the full support and toolkit provided by the federal Department of Homeland Security to, at a county and state level, be able to thwart this national threat has been really crucial. We've also received a variety of funding from Congress to help us at the state and local level combat these threats, to buy additional software tools and conduct additional training, and even in some cases, so for example, in the Secretary of State's office, we have an entire series of mobile office equipment. So if we have a local jurisdiction that is impacted by, let's say, a ransomware attack that takes down their network, we have a county clerk's office that's trying to conduct the election, process voter registration, make sure that folks can get an absentee ballot. We are able to mobilize that equipment and get them set up completely outside of their network so that they can continue to do that work if they're grounded by an attack. So these are some of the things that we are doing here, and of course nationally in every state, similar activities are going on. We are in an order of magnitude better place, better protected, and better equipped to combat that threat for the 2020 election. But the reality is no system can ever be perfect or completely impenetrable. So here in New Mexico, we have some of the most secure elections in the nation because of the practices we already have in place. And one of the most important of those, and these are low-tech solutions, is the use of paper ballots. Every election conducted in New Mexico uses only voter-marked and verified paper ballots. There's always a paper trail that allows for auditing and verification of vote counting systems. And in a high-tech world, this low-tech strategy of paper ballots is one of the best ways to protect the vote. Post-election audits after every election have been conducted here since 2008, and that is in order to ensure the accuracy in the election outcome, particularly when we have tight races. We want to make sure that our tabulating systems were not compromised in any way, either intentionally or by error. And so when we go through this post-election audit process, we randomly select a few races and precincts throughout the state. It's set forth in statute, so you can see what the formula is. And we hand count those ballots and compare them to the machine counts and make sure they add up. And if there is a wide discrepancy, then we will continue picking more precincts and hand counting more results all the way up until potentially a full recount. So that's how we make sure that obviously we do extensive testing on the front end of our tabulating systems before they go out into the field. They're very well secured and protected while they're out there counting the ballots. But that's how we make sure on the back end that even if we completely miss something and the absolute worst were to happen and those systems were to be tampered with, that we do get an accurate election count at the end of that process. We talked a little bit already about the high-tech solutions, but I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we do specifically here in New Mexico. We have full-time IT staff dedicated to cybersecurity. And again, we work with those federal and state partners, DHS, FBI, and in New Mexico, we actually work directly with our National Guard cybersecurity unit. Yes, there is such a thing, and they are deployed and working together with us in our bunker, so to speak, as we are approaching election day and actively monitoring systems, and we have more eyes on the process. And of course, we work with those partners together with our counties on a daily basis to improve those systems. I mentioned already, but we have air-gapped vote counting and aggregation systems. So in other words, we're really putting those processes in place to protect our systems from any vector of potential tampering or threat by making sure that, you know, even when we get down to the level of a tabulator that counts the votes, that is never ever connected to the internet here. And that's really important because we want to prevent any potential opportunity for that potential threat to come in the door. And as I mentioned, of course, there's still just tons of work to be done. This is a never-ending process. We will always be working on this, especially as the threat evolves and begins to look different. And speaking of that, you know, for me in this election, I would say I am most concerned about some of these sort of outside, not necessarily direct threats, and that is misinformation and disinformation about voting and elections that's out there in social media in particular, and especially with these questions and concerns that have been brought up over the last couple of months around mail-in voting, you know, the aspersions that have been cast on the process, questions about the Postal Service. There is a risk of confusing voters, of deliberately misinforming them so that they choose not to vote, and depressing overall turnout, which of course is just bad for democracy, right? We want every voter, no matter their political persuasion, to come out and make their voice heard in the process. On that note, I will let this group know, because I know that the mail service, the U.S. Postal Service, is a really hot topic right now. I am having my second of conversations with the federal U.S. Postmaster tomorrow, along with my colleagues from the National Association of Secretaries of State. We had an initial conversation, a small group of us, with him a couple of weeks ago. We have gotten just, I think, incredible assurances, not just from the U.S. Postmaster himself and his senior staff, but all the way down to the regional, state, and local level. Those men and women who are running the Postal Service here in our state and regionally are incredibly dedicated to making sure that election mail gets where it needs to go, and that they are able to really demonstrate their incredible ability to meet the needs of the voters of this country during this election. And so a variety of some of the proposed policy changes that I know have been talked about in the news, such as the removal of sorting machines, the pilot program that was going to send a mail carrier out first thing in the morning without all the mail coming in first, the cutting down of overtime. All of those policies have been canceled and or rolled back. Our main post office in Albuquerque and the other post offices outside of New Mexico that process New Mexico mail, those post offices are no longer going to be affected by these policy changes. Sorting machines that had been removed or were slated to be removed are no longer being removed or have been returned. But this is basically a trust but verify situation that we have. We have ongoing communication with our local and regional postal service representatives to make sure that processes of accountability that we've put in place with them are continuing to be upheld, that their commitment is continuing to come through, and that they're taking every step necessary to get every ballot and every application where it needs to go for this particular election. So I feel highly confident in the system that we have here in New Mexico and with our systems here, both for mail voting as well as for voting in person. So let me talk a little bit about that, and then I know there's lots of questions. So I'm gonna hopefully wrap up here in just a minute or so. So as I mentioned, voting by mail is a great option if you choose to use it, particularly in the times of COVID. We don't want any voter to have to choose between their personal safety and their vote. And so we've made some improvements to the absentee voting system here in New Mexico. As I mentioned, you can apply for an absentee ballot online starting today at nmvote.com. The county clerks in 10 counties are sending out, including Santa Fe, applications for an absentee ballot to everyone who hasn't applied for one yet. You can fill that out and send it back. Starting October 6th, those ballots will go in the mail. And we're encouraging voters, the last day to apply for a ballot is the 20th of October. Please don't wait that late. Please get that application in as soon as possible. And if you're going to mail it back, just make sure you get it in the mail by the 27th of October. That's a week before Election Day. That's what the Postal Service says it needs to get those ballots back timely. And if you're concerned about getting that ballot back timely, there's two pieces of information that will be helpful to you. First is that we will now have an intelligent barcode on the outer envelope of every ballot. You'll be able to track where your ballot is at any given time in the mail delivery process using our portal at nmvote.org. So you won't have to wonder where that ballot is. You'll be able to see it through the online tracking system at every point in the process. But we are also making sure that county clerks, and you may have read it in the paper today, have drop boxes located at every polling place so that you can quickly get in and out to drop your ballot. Many of them are going to be posted up right outside the polling place, so you don't even have to go inside somewhere. But if you do go inside that, you get to go to your own dedicated line, and hopefully there won't even be a line to drop your ballot. And that'll just keep folks from, having to further potentially expose themselves, but to be able to safely drop that ballot. You should know, though, there are multiple ways to cast that ballot. Beyond voting, of course, we will have extensive early in-person and election day voting in all 33 counties. That information is all going to be on nmvote.org as well. If you haven't looked up your voter registration in a while, I encourage you to go do that now and just make sure everything's in order. And you'll even be able to see, nearby polling locations, and starting next week to be able to access your sample ballot. And I'll end by saying, I know that this group was interested in what do we do to protect the integrity and security and accuracy of our elections here in New Mexico. And I've addressed a lot of what we do already, but I think what's really important is that there are two sides of the coin to election integrity and security. One, of course, is protecting, right? And making sure that systems can't be tampered with, ballots can't be tampered with, counting is accurate. And all of those processes, by the way, at any point in time a ballot is being cast or counted, those are transparent processes. Those are processes where we have independent watchers from groups that are not affiliated with a political party, and representatives from the candidates and political parties all have eyes on those processes at all times. So it's not like these things are done behind closed doors, voters, right? These things are done in an open and transparent, but systematic and secure way. As well, doing everything that we can to make sure that there is ample access to the ballot box, no matter which method a voter chooses to use, is an aspect of election integrity. Because if we are not doing our best as election administrators to make sure that every eligible voter can cast their ballot, then by definition, we're suppressing the vote. So we have to make sure that everybody who wants their voice heard does not have to go through unreasonable hurdles to get that ballot cast. And so with that, I could go on and on, but I really do want to get to your questions. And so I am open for those. Thank you.
So again, you have several ways to ask your questions. You can put them in the Q&A, and we do have one there already. You can raise your hand, and we have our hand raised already. But first, I'd like to ask Judy Williams if she doesn't mind. She mentioned to all of us the League of Women Voters online guide, and if she would say a few words about that, and then Steve will ask the Q&A question.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I had forgotten I was going to put a plug in the beginning. The League of Women Voters of New Mexico has an online voter guide. We're covering every election throughout the state, including local races, county commission races, etc. It's online. It went live yesterday, vote411.org, and you can put in your address and see who's on your ballot, see how they answered our questions or